Hey guys, it's Felicia. I am still somewhere in the world, vacationing, luxuriating, just living my best life right now, trying to get my life together, y'all. And while I take this much needed respite, I have something fabulous for you. You don't want to miss this. Attorney Anitra is back with legal therapy. Attorney Anitra, take it away.
Welcome back. I'm attorney Anitra, and whereas most attorneys wait for you to be fired before they can take your case, I'm one of the only attorneys that I know who walks you through the process of clarifying you and figuring out who you are before we put together a case that works for you in your life. This is session 3. We have been talking about clarifying you before you qualify them. In the first session, we talked about how the acronym CLARIFY is going to help us walk through this journey of discovering ourselves on a deeper level. The C for CLARIFY stood for context, as we dug into our past to try to figure out where our initial triggers, our initial points of pain came from. Then we talked about legacy. And we looked into the future on how we wanted to leave an impact and what we wanted to be known for. That should have focused us and started tapping into our true areas of compassion for ourselves and for others. In this session, the A in Clarify stands for asset. So I have a question for you. How are you an asset? An asset is something valuable. And value is something that deserves to be important, deserves to be worthy. So if I were to ask you, how are you important? How are you worthy? What would you say? Real quick, answer that question. 9 times out of 10, when I'm speaking to an adult, what they tell me is what they do and not who they are. And one of the primary culprits of this is me. It's taken me a long time, and it's still a work in progress, to describe myself in terms of who I am and not what I do. But there's someone we can talk to who knows this answer about you, and somebody we don't talk to very often, but we're going to talk to them in this session. And I'm talking about your inner child. Let's unpack that. I've been telling you guys all my business, so why not keep going, right? I talked to you about my childhood and how there was a lot of turmoil around my parents' divorce. And as the middle of 5 children, we had our ups and our downs with that. But the ups were glorious. I remember, even before my younger 2 siblings were born, I was born in the suburbs. And our suburban life in Los Angeles, California was picturesque. I mean, the neighborhood was pristine, diverse, uplifting, neighborly. We borrowed each other's sugar and eggs and all of that. And I remember my days being filled at home with mommy, in between watching episodes of Gumby and listening to Aretha Franklin on vinyl. This was all, of course, in preparation for the 2 big events that would transpire that day. The first of these events would be my 2 older brothers coming home. Sometimes they'd come home directly from school, other times they'd be dropped off by teammate parents as they came back from Pop Warner football practice. This is where my love for football and other sports came from, watching my brothers play. They were my heroes. I'd remember peeking out the window, waiting for them to come home. Oh, I wanted to be their best friend so badly. But of course, I was neat, their baby sister, the very first girl in our family. As glorious as watching them come home and running behind them as they began to settle into their afternoon routines, it paled in comparison to the biggest event of the day, Daddy coming home. When my daddy came home, sometimes my mom would be chasing me around the house because I just did something I wasn't supposed to. And I remember one particular day, the timing was just so perfect that as she was chasing behind me, he walks through the door and I jump and I lunge into his arms and he catches me. And he turns around so my mom can't get to me and he says, "What are you doing to my neat?" And we look at each other, we laugh and we giggle. And my mom just gives us this look like, these two troublemakers. What can I do about it? Those were the good old days. So after the tragedy had already set in at that time with losing my grandmother, it was boiling underneath the surface, and my parents, although I didn't see it, were having a lot of problems behind closed doors. And even after they separated and my mom moved me and my brothers, and at that time my little sister was here, to San Diego, there were still glimpses of hope. My parents were actually still trying to make it work. That's how we got my little brother. He was the only one of us born in San Diego. And even then, I was able to tap into these sources of joy. The joy of coming to find out, learning to read. And I love learning words because I had all of these emotions as a child. And the more words I learned, the more I was able to express those emotions. And then I was able to take those language skills and become a performing artist. So I began to be in plays and to dance. Oh, I love to dance. And the best part of it all was when my older brothers would come and watch me perform and go crazy. They were my biggest cheerleaders. Can you do that? Can you think back to your childhood and remember those moments of bliss, of glory? Can you remember what it felt like to be completely comfortable being who you are and experiencing the world in all of its wondrous form? This is an important exercise for us as we determine what our present day value is. After my divorce, I had time. First of all, I took a year off. I was really just chilling for a year. And I know not everybody has that ability to do that. I acknowledge the privilege that I had to do it. I'm grateful for it. And so what I hope to provide as a service for others is to take what I learned in those moments and to share it with you. So you don't have to do that much work. I can just bring it to you and you can consume it and learn how important you are today. In that time, I had to refocus and reintroduce myself to Neat. And if we're honest with ourselves as we progress in life, we forget that part of us. We shut that part of us away because that part of us isn't productive. We have to engage in adulting now. We have to be serious now. But according to Dr. Margaret Paul, that idea of having to protect yourself and avoid pain, that's called your wounded self. Dr. Margaret Paul wrote this process called inner bonding, and I stumbled upon it in my time of self-discovery over these past few years, and honestly was one of the biggest jumps I've had in really getting to the next level of healing and breakthrough for my life. In her book, The 6 Steps to Inner Bonding, she talks about how when we have a lack of peace, that is our inner child giving us information that we should pay attention to. Our inner child is that part of our souls, of our subconscious minds, that says, hey, I remember who you are and who you want to be. and why you matter. Listen to me as I give you information about you. Our wounded selves, however, are the parts of us that experienced the disappointment for the first time and began to build protective barriers against that pain. And so we tucked away the inner child because the inner child experiences disappointment. The inner child can experience shame. The inner child, if left vulnerable and exposed, can crumble. At least that's what our minds begin to think. And so we become adults who are our wounded selves. Ideally, according to Dr. Paul, you become a loving adult. The loving adult isn't engaging in actions to get love and avoid pain. The loving adult is here to, number one, learn to love yourself. And with that love, feel that there's such an abundance of it that you can love other people. You are not giving out of lack, which you can't really do. We date out of lack. We get jobs out of lack. What we don't have, we look to fill us up. Instead, the idea is to give, to date, to work out of your abundance. I didn't experience the joys of my inner child again, really, consistently, until I went to college, undergrad. I made college decisions the year Drumline came out, so although I had a very safe state school in California picked out with a very safe major, at the last minute when a scholarship opportunity presented itself, I ended up going to an HBCU, Grambling State University, in a place I'd never heard of, Grambling, Louisiana. Okay. I went not even understanding that humidity was a thing. You gotta remember, I was from Southern California. Okay. I didn't know about humidity. I just didn't understand why it was hot and sticky, but that's beside the point. But in my college journey, I began to do what? Tap into performing arts again after having to leave it alone for a while. I started to learn languages again. I majored in French and I minored in English. I began to travel. I was around a tribe. Everything I had broken down in my childhood, I began to rebuild in a way during college. According to Dr. Paul, in order for us to get to a place where we can tap into our inner child, we have to open ourselves up to that dialogue. And that's what my point here is in asset. Often, our dialogue, our conversations reflect our LinkedIn profile. They reflect our resumes. They reflect our achievements, everything that we've done that should have, if we listen to the advice correctly, it should have put us in a place of prestige, of protection, of security. I should have this amount of money coming in as a salary because I went to that school, because I majored in that. What we're finding out is that those credentials are not guaranteeing safety for us.
Huh?
And so the inner bonding process, if we do it right, we need to open ourselves up to this dialogue with how we are wounded and how we are trying to avoid pain. And we need to talk with our inner child to see what is it that used to make you happy, used to bring you joy that you don't engage in anymore. I had this conversation. I was like, this feels so silly. But if you're in a practice of meditative practices, then, it won't be a huge jump for you to get there. But in a quiet room, I just sat down and I started talking to Neat Neat. Hey, are you in there? And I was surprised when she immediately said, yes, I am. I'm in here. You ignore me all the time. I'm sorry. As I began to have this dialogue, which really means taking the time and just thinking about your childhood and really looking at the different pieces of it, you start to learn, wow, there's so many things that I abandoned. Why don't I do that anymore? Because we thought that was childish. because we thought these are our responsibilities. And we have very real responsibilities. A lot of us have families and children, and we don't really have, or we don't feel like we have the time or the luxury to sit and prioritize what makes us happy and what brings us joy. But I'm here to tell you that if you're not engaging in this process, I believe it's a great likelihood that you're making decisions from your wounded self, as Dr. Paul would describe it. When I went to law school, I thought to myself, I need to put away all that stuff that was fun in college. I'm doing serious things now. I had just gotten married. I was in law school. Life is very serious. And I got really sick. You know, the food intolerances. I was like, I don't know. Is it just because I'm old? Actually, I was in my mid-20s. So by the time I finished law school, I was going into my 30s. So I'm a child, okay? I can look back on that and say, you were a baby. What were you doing? So here I am, this 26-year-old who feels like she has to be so serious about life, okay? And what I allowed to happen to me, even though I had my moments of advocacy and defiance, I began to conform, very much so, to what an attorney should look like and should talk like. I had my ways of defying that and trying to fight for my identity, and I'm glad that I did. For example, I started my own law practice. That was very whoa, aren't you bold and courageous? There was still a part of my inner child crying out you can't give everything up, okay? You can't completely conform to the machine. But in my clothing, the pearls, the suits, the tweed suits, I had a friend come over and look in my closet once. And my friend said, what in the Golden Girls is going on in here? Because back in college, I was edgy. I was into fashion. I was into self-expression. And I had cut my hair and I went natural before YouTube tutorials was a thing. I had begun to really find my style and my voice. And that began to be erased when I went to law school. And so in a very tangible way, my divorce and that period of self-exploration that followed really served me because I allowed it to. You can take a look on some of my web pages and you'll see me with different looks. You'll see me in the suit with my arms crossed, very lawyerly. Yes, very serious. And then you'll see some pictures that are more about what I'm about. You'll see me sitting on the couch and it's more of a softer thing. Because there was a time when I thought I was too soft, too emotional to be an attorney. And now that's actually one of the biggest tools and strengths of my practice, that I can work with my clients on an emotional level. And then you might see some videos with me and a hat and some earrings, and I'm just kind of feeling my own vibe, because for me, it really has been a progression to get back to myself. And so if you look at your journey, can you track when you began to really deviate, dare I say, lose yourself? Can you look back on a time when you felt, oh my gosh, I was crushing it? What were you like? What were your values? How did you view yourself? When we come back, I'm going to give you the cheat code. If you don't want to sit down and do things like inner bonding and it feels weird to you, I have a shortcut, and I have a story of a client who really did the work and was transformed by her process of reconnecting with her inner child. Talk to you soon. Welcome back. We are talking about how to identify how you're an asset in life and business, at work, just in general. We're trying to identify where we are worthy, where we are important, and hint, hint, hint is not what you do. It is who you are. And I've been sharing stories of my childhood as I've had to reconnect with my inner child. And I've had to work through the pains of the wounded self that's developed since I've been adulting. But also noticing those glimpses of time when I had reconnected unknowingly to my inner child. Those are honestly some of the best memories of my life. And so I'm going to leave you with a shortcut if you don't want to do the long way. But I encourage you to do this work because I've seen clients do this work and I've seen their lives change. For example, and I've mentioned her before, my client Jenny, what really made her case successful wasn't the settlement. For me, the settlement was just indicative of the work that she did on herself. She was at work. She was passed over a promotion for a department that she had brought to success. It was a new acquisition for the company, and she did the work to make it profitable. They promoted somebody else outside of her protected class to run it after that. They expected her to leave. She wanted to leave. Culturally, she wasn't expected to fight back, but something in her told her to reach out, and she and I were connected. And what transpired really between Jenny and I was a very real conversation, very real dialogue about past pain. As we talked more and more, I started to see the patterns and relationships that she had at work, and they were repeating. And I would hear her say very similar things in different scenarios that said, I see a pattern of how she relates to people here. And as I kept talking to her about that and bringing the patterns to her attention, she gave me a clue about her past. And I said, that's confirmation. I wasn't going to pry too much. After all, I'm not a licensed therapist. But when the conversation is natural and there's trust between me and my client, we do dive in. Where does that come from? And we began to talk about her wounded self. And we began to find language from her inner child, from her childhood experiences that were positive. But we had to identify those things that came in between that made her need to protect herself in a way that wasn't natural, to be honest. And I saw this transformation from somebody who was so confused to somebody who was really confident. I saw Jenny shy away from conflict and then begin to expertly handle it and navigate sticky situations with strategy, with brilliance. And she brought back to me the exact evidence that I needed to show the company you cannot explain away the discrimination. She executed the process beautifully. And at times it was really uncomfortable. At times it was really emotional. Jenny benefited from me developing this process and beginning to understand my style of practicing law in order to be true to my inner child. You see, I couldn't continue practicing law when it was just cut and dry, just the facts, you get fired or going to court. No wonder I wanted to quit. That's not who I am. Me, I've got to get on the emotional level with people. For me, the way I fiercely protect those I love, that's what I have to be able to do. You know, as I started to really struggle with the reality that I was losing my family, I really began to develop a wounded self. By the time I was 7 or 8, I couldn't have been older than 8. One day, my older brother decided he was going to run away, one of my brothers. As he left, and before he could round the corner of our neighborhood and disappear to Lord knows where, I ran out and threw myself in the dirt in the front of the house. And I wailed, I cried, I begged, please don't go, please don't go. And he was like, Neat, get back in the house, get back in the house. And I refused. I mean, at this point, my hands had become muddy as my tears were mixing with the dirt that I had thrown myself in. And exasperated and worn down, he eventually agreed, come on, let's go back in the house. Clean me off. That's the person I am. I am fiercely protective of those who are in my tribe. And so when I was able to reconnect with my inner child, I began to understand what I needed to really be myself, to honor myself, to love myself enough to where I have enough to then love other people. And that comes out on my law practice now. Now this is life work. Now I'm in purpose. Now I am me, and I have enough love and respect for myself that I can share with other people instead of constantly being beat down by other people's trauma because I haven't dealt with my own. And this is still a lifelong process. I'm consistently in this journey. Some days are better than others, but I know I am a far cry from where I used to be. All I wanted to do was give up practicing law. So here's the shortcut. If you don't want to talk to your inner child on that level, if you think I sound crazy, here's a shortcut. But I encourage you to take this shortcut and then do the work if you start to see that it's working. I want you to think about the time when you were in flow. This idea of flow was developed by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in his book called Flow. And it's a positive type psychology that says there's a place where you can get to where you are challenged enough, but you also have enough skill to get through the task that you are working on. Another way to phrase it is being in the zone. If you've heard athletes talk about, there are these moments when, a basketball player is on the court and they're just in the zone. Steph Curry, you know what I'm saying? There's sometimes you can just see people like, man, they are working hard. You can tell that they are employing skill, but they are handling their business. And that's a place where you are really connected to yourself. You believe in yourself enough. The imposter syndrome is not holding you back. And you're plowing forward and it's fulfilling. Think back on those moments of your life. When I look at my life that way, sure enough, guess what comes up? Those moments in college, those moments in my childhood when I was in stage, when I was learning languages, there's a pattern. So if you can identify the areas of your life when you were in flow, you will be able to see who you are. And I want you to not think of those achievements. I didn't tell you to cite your resume and all your accolades. I didn't say that. I said to identify the moments when you were in flow. How did you feel? What were the conditions? And what do you think was fulfilling to you in those moments? What did you like about it? And as you begin to describe these moments, that's going to be closer to the description of your worth than anything that you've actually done. Not the achievement per se, but the conditions of why you were in flow and why it meant that much to you. Those are going to provide some hints. Best case scenario, you do the work. I've taken Dr. Margaret therapy programs, pre-recorded therapy programs. She recently came out with the book. It's good stuff. I want you to do the work, but I need to get you to a place where you can see your worth past what you do for other people. Once you get there, then your eyes will open to how you've positioned yourself in the workplace or in relationships to not be truly valued, where you are accepting conditions that are beneath you. That's my goal here, to get you very clear on how you are worthy. That will help us determine who's stepping out of line in your life, who's violating who you are. Thank you for joining me on this journey. This has been session 3, talking about asset. It's the A in clarify. Next time, we're going to be talking about a dirty word, rest. So make sure you come back for session 4. Thank you and be well.